Aloha and good morning. Great to see all of you here tuning in to the Honolulu Star-Advertiser Facebook page for our COVID-19 care conversation. It is Thursday, May 14th. Great to see all of you tuning in here to our conversation. I'm Ryan Kalesuji here on Oahu. Yunji Denise is still on the Big Island. We hope to see her here soon. But Yunji, we have a great guest who last time had a lot of participation in this conversation. A lot of people excited to see her here again.
Yes, that's right. And that is Dr. Christina Kishimoto. She is the superintendent of Hawaii Public Schools. And whether you have kids or not, what happens in education affects all of us. This is, of course, an issue when it comes to Hawaii's children and the parents, but also it's an economic issue. If we have schools not reopening, then how does our economy really restart? So we're going to be talking to her about the plans to get students back into classrooms. Corey Rosenlee, who was on recently, had a good point that just because the classroom door is closed, school is not closed. Teachers have been working very hard, students and parents also participating in that effort. But when do we get to actually see kids back in the classroom? We're going to talk to Dr. Kishimoto about that today.
That's right. Again, this is the COVID-19 care conversation brought to you by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative, as well as Hawaii Pacific Health, our partners in this conversation. And really, this is a way to engage with you, the viewers. The different format with our show is that we allow sort of our guests to sort of speak and share their mind and answer your questions. It's not necessarily these sound bites, but a way for them to really get into some of the details. And that's some of the things that we appreciate with our guests that come in that kind of share into detail some of the things that are happening. So we're excited to talk to her. We always like to start off the show, of course, as we talk about COVID with some of the latest cases. And yesterday, 3 new cases here in the state of Hawaii.
Yeah, it's really good news. We've had single digits for over 3 weeks now, and nearly 90% of the people who have been infected have now been classified as recovered. Hawaii remains one of the lowest infection rates and lowest mortality rates in the country. Of course, that all comes at a great economic and personal cost. And one of the ways that we've been able to achieve that is by having schools closed. So when do we actually get kids back in the classroom? Well, Dr. Christina Kishimoto is here to join us. And Dr. Kishimoto, thank you so much for being here. We want to involve the audience as much as possible. So we'll get started right away with Alex Kaukini, who asks, what are the details for summer school? It is what every parent wants to know.
So aloha, Youngji and Ryan. Appreciate being on here again with you. Love to have this conversation with the public. Yes, summer school is the hot topic. There's a lot going into the planning. In fact, while I'm here with you, my team is finalizing the plans with our tri-level leadership. So our principals and complex area superintendents are finalizing a multifaceted plan. We will have it out in the next few days. By next week, all of the details will be out there. It is a by-school program that's multifaceted. So we'll have extended school year for students who need services, special education students, English language learners students as well. We'll have some services. We're also going to have credit recovery opportunities for students who need to bring up their grades to get credits at the secondary level. We have an opportunity for e-school, which is authentic or original credit. So students want to get ahead for next year. So it's not just about credit recovery. And we are going to have a blended approach. We're going to have kids online, still learning using distance learning primarily, but we're also going to have some small classroom offerings, a maximum of 6 to 8 students. For students who have struggled with using a device for learning, they are prioritized for those spaces. And we're going to have a number of schools that are going to be offering that throughout our state.
How can parents register for something like that? I know, probably the majority of parents would like to see their kids in that 6 to 8 offering. So how do they get to qualify?
So that's for our students who are most struggling. Those are the in-person services. Otherwise, they will have opportunities to register for distance learning. So in order to keep, again, to the social distancing guidance, to have a slow startup to school reopening, we are keeping very limited numbers at school sites, but we're also looking at learning hubs that are digital learning hubs that are being brought into communities. So we'll be talking about those details as well, which will not be in school sites. It provides an opportunity to spread out our students online and also in person in schools and in other community areas.
I want to talk a little bit more about the broader aspects of digital learning and some of the questions that we received. We know that there's more coming in. Were sent to us actually yesterday in other shows that we had. And one of the questions was really about the expectations of this digital learning, because we know that some teachers have a skill set with it and some don't. How is the DOE and schools and teachers sort of managing this equity in online learning, with some students able to do it and some students not, and some teachers being more maybe equipped to do this sort of teaching? How are you guys managing that?
So imagine going from all in school to an overnight crisis where the state gets shut down, and then I announce we're going from in-person to digital learning. Without having had a digital learning approach that's been broad scale. We have e-school experience. We have some students who have done some blended learning. We have students who have done online classes with University of Hawaii and some of the other universities, but that's a small group of students. Now we're talking about 180,000 plus students online. So we have had variations of readiness. We have some families who don't have access to Wi-Fi in their homes. And so we did partner up with service providers who provided some free access or some hubs that they can activate at home, but not everyone was comfortable doing that either. And so we've had to blend between those who are online and those who receive packets of information. We also had schools preload computers. Now, all of our students have access to computers in their schools. So that was an advantage, that at least our students have that readiness to use a computer, but not everyone knows how to use a Wi-Fi hub. And so as we move forward, we are assuming that the DOE moving forward will be using a blended learning approach permanently, even moving forward. That provides new opportunities, but it means we have to provide training to parents, which will begin this summer, and provide opportunities to look at connectivity across the state. To do connectivity, we're working with our legislative delegation that's representing us in DC right now. We're working with a broadband HUI that has lots of, about 70, 80 representatives from business, industry, government, and the Board of Ed are working together to talk about access. And we're providing training for teachers to be able to teach online. We've had teachers teaching teachers in incredible ways. And we also have a Hawaii Distance Learning Forum that was started by a teacher. We have the Hawaii Society for Technology that we have here as well. There's also a set of teachers that are providing formal training for teachers. So we've built up capacity very, very quickly. Now moving forward, the reality is that all teachers need to know how to teach via distance learning moving forward.
Well, I want to pick up on that. You said that you think that this blended approach will go on, will continue indefinitely, if you will. Do you foresee those 6 to 8 classroom size continuing into the fall? Should parents be prepared for distance learning to continue that far ahead?
So we are aiming to open up on August 4th. That's the start of our new school year. What that looks like is what we're designing now. We need to stagger the startup. We need to reintroduce students and teachers and staff to the new safety measures when they come into a school building. We're going to be providing opportunities for students and families to elect to do their education online to the extent that we can provide that using our platform. One of the advantages of the timing for this having happened is that we were already in the midst of having rolled out Google applications. We had Gmail for all students and staff. And so prior to this year, we wouldn't have had those things in place. We have an e-school platform we've had in place for years, and now we can add classes from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade exclusively online. We can do synchronous and asynchronous instruction. And so prior to this past year, we wouldn't have had this readiness. And so the modernization of technology work that the DOE has been engaged in really helped us to transition very quickly. There's still more work to do because not everybody was trained on those platforms at this point.
I want to bring in another question, and really it's just a comment, but special education, I think that brings a lot of questions. We know that special education teachers, very important to our schools, and with some of these parents now having to care for their children, how is the DOE sort of facilitating the needs of the special education students?
So we hear our parents loud and clear. There are parents who who are taking full advantage of the online learning approaches because it fits the readiness of the student and what the student's needs are, right? But there are also a whole group of students where telelearning is not appropriate to their needs and to the approach that fits best with how they engage in learning. And so those are the families we're most concerned with, which is why we want to get them back into school buildings during the summer session to start instruction again and services for that engagement of students. We'll be able to see in this summer session, how that works in terms of the small groups, where special ed students are typically educated in small groups, so we'll continue that. They're going to have even smaller sessions. For some of our students, it's going to be one-on-one. For some of them, it's going to be 2-to-1. So again, it'll be modified based on the students' learning needs and their disability and what they need in terms of what they missed this fourth quarter. So we know we have a lot of work to do there. It's really the health and safety that's going to determine how quickly we can step that up again so that we can support our families.
Renita Kim has a question. If parents are not comfortable sending their children back to schools, will distance learning still be an option? Will students be penalized? There are some parents who might not want to send their kids back, or perhaps they have someone who has a compromised immune system that lives in the home, maybe an older relative or maybe a parent themselves. What's the plan for those students whose families don't feel comfortable?
So I will mention that I had a recent meeting that involved the governor and our 4 mayors to talk about, as well as representation from our emergency management team, to talk about kind of the parameters, the guardrails for reopening school in August, and how do we provide the correct safety measures in light of the most up-to-date CDC guidance and Department of Health guidance. So that's going to be driving what happens in schools. What we're planning for is how do we maximize the opportunities for parents to have choice, to be able to keep their kids home if that's what they are opting for a variety of reasons, including health reasons, to be able to do their learning online. So that distance learning approach is also what we're planning for. The health piece, those conditions that we have to meet to be in person, and the distance learning. And how do we do that with a teaching body that's going to have to be split between online learning and in-person learning? And that's not just for instruction. That has to do also with food services. We typically either do grab and go or we do in-person meals. And so now we're saying, how do we split the students so that they can either eat in school if they're doing in-school instruction, and how do we provide grab and go for those who are going to be learning at home? So a lot of complicated kind of matters that we have to work through, and we're doing it with the best guidance being provided by DOH and CDC around those guardrails we have to make decisions within. And not all of them are clear at this point.
Right. And on that, Monique has a question. She was just before Renita, Ryan. We want to call that one up. Did you expect a hybrid for starting school back up for the fall, similar to what some folks on the mainland are planning, where it's, 2 days in school and then 3 days at home? That's the question from Monique Delgado there. What's your thought on that kind of a system?
So that is on the table. Our principals are talking right now about if we're going to do a hybrid model, how do we balance that, and how are we responsive to families also who may struggle with a hybrid model? Again, there's lots of demands on the school system as well, with families who are saying a hybrid model is not going to work for them, because when their children are home, they're not going to be able to support them because they're at work, or they're providers in our health field or in our police or other forces, or they're teachers themselves, trying to figure out how to manage a family at home and this new instructional approach. So again, we're going to try to make the best decisions possible to provide choices to families. It's going to be a balancing act of how to do that within limited resources that we have, including a limited number of teachers who are part of our workforce. We're not going to be able to step up hiring more teachers because there just isn't a workforce out there to hire more teachers. Ideally, I would bring in more teachers to split that body up between the online and the in-person. and we're working with a fixed group of teachers. They're doing tremendous work, and they're part of this designing.
I mean, when you think about it, there are just so many different scenarios that have to be factored in. I mean, things that, I mean, as an outsider, just not even realizing the demands and all the different scenarios. So it's interesting to hear that. One of the, of course, another scenario is those multi-track schools. We understand some were supposed to be set starting as early as July 1st. What will be happening with some of those schools that were set to start then?
So we have only a small group of schools that are multi-track, and I may miss one, Holomua, Kapolei Middle, and Mililani Middle. And so we're working with those principals to align them with the rest of the system. And so we've been working through that now. And so those schools will be sharing out information with their body of parents and students to get ready for that transition. But right now we're trying to align our startup of the school year.
Another important part of school, of course, is physical activity. How do you envision athletics moving forward at all levels? It's just hard for me to envision a situation where we can have, you know, kids playing volleyball, basketball, football, and the little ones doing PE in person and trying to do social distancing. What's that look like?
So there's a couple of things to think about here. One is UH and other colleges throughout the nation have talked about the fact that it's going to be hard to make those decisions right now until we know a little more in the summer, and we're in the same situation. Our athletic leagues have been thinking about this, and they'll be coming up with some recommendations themselves around the competitive athletic side. On the PE, the physical education side, we want to have our kids still engaging in healthy movement. That's going to be important, especially during the stressful times that our kids have been engaged in, and these times have been disrupted times. The advantage that Hawaii has is that we have good weather. And we also have in most of our schools some decent outdoor spaces where we can not only move physical education outside, but also some instruction outside. We can do very INA-based kind of project-based learning and other opportunities there. So we're looking at our classrooms as indoor-outdoor spaces right now in order to maximize the space, keeping our kids active, keeping them moving. But those are going to need to be adjusted as opposed to going into a closed space for that kind of PE.
Nina has a question here about face masks. Will the DOE consider requiring face masks for staff and students as a case for some schools in California, and how will this be enforced if so?
So we're working with Department of Health, who is also consulting with CDC around guidelines that are also age specific. Putting a face mask on a preschooler or kindergartner probably is not going to work, right? So we've got to make sure that it's realistic and that we don't say that because you can't have a face mask on because of age appropriateness that you can't come to school, right? We don't want to be at that kind of decision making. So we want to say what are the conditions we have to put in place to keep a healthy space for kids who are going to be touching each other, and they're going to be in closer proximity because they're young, and it's going to be harder for them to understand this concept of social distancing once they're in school. For the older kids, yes, we'll be talking about what are the parameters for how kids move through hallways, what happens when they go into a class for a longer period of time. Can we remove face masks then? Who needs to have them? Those are all decisions we're making with the Department of Health and getting their guidelines. Again, those guardrails we have to work within. So that also includes on school buses. Some of our kids in Oahu take the public transportation. So we've brought this up recently with Mayor Caldwell around thinking ahead about what that means for those kids who take public transportation. And we can set guidance for them, but we need the city working with us on those guidelines as well. So we're working together on those guidelines, and that's what we will use to then make final decisions and determinations.
There's some questions coming in about meal programs. You know, the DOE has done a tremendous job of making food still available in those grab and go packets, as you talked about. Is that something that's going to continue to be available? There are some concerns that people have about access to food.
So we will continue to provide access to food. We'll be transitioning from the grab and go kind of emergency situation we're in now to a few days after school ends, which is May 28th for this school year. We'll actually be expanding or extending grab and go for several days. We'll have a few days in which we won't have food available as we transition to the summer school feed program. And then we're looking now at how many schools have the staff available and the capacity to continue summer feed. Summer feed will look very similar to grab and go, with the exception of those schools that are going to have in-school summer learning opportunities. And so that's all being worked out. But yes, there will be a summer feed program. How many sites we can do is what we're looking at now. And then there's the transition into the school year that we have to be ready for. One of the biggest challenges for us, if it's not already obvious as I'm talking about these details, is there is no break, right, between this emergency into summer school and figuring out how we maximize that summer learning and do feeding and get ready for a new design for the fall. And they're all bumping into each other now in terms of planning, and it is a very, very stressful time for everyone. And I do thank my staff across the board. They are doing tremendous work. Our principals, our teachers, our support staff, tremendous work going out of their way, working very long hours. But this is hard because we're not stopping to plan so we're doing it together because we want to be of service to our families and say, these are the programs we're going to keep going so that you can figure out what you're doing on your end on a family decision-making and in terms of work and so forth.
One of the questions that we got submitted earlier was just about the communication with the department, and if there is an opportunity or a way for there to be some sort of interactive communication where maybe parents could send questions into, or maybe could provide suggestions or comments of things that they're going to. Is there something that's been set up? Because some of the parents are saying this forum is maybe the only way that they can connect with some of the DOE members. What would you advise to those parents that may have questions or want to speak directly to the DOE?
So, the DOE is all of us, 22,000 employees. So we're encouraging parents to work through their teachers and principals because that's the shortest distance between a parent and the DOE. We're trying to get as much information out on our website, social media, holding a variety of forums. We're actually going to do something a little different the first week of June, where I'm going to be having 4 webinars. One for parents, one for government officials, one for business and industry, one for nonprofits, and our internal staff as well. And the idea is to give a summary of where what we've completed during this closure period, how we're going to transition into summer and into the fall, and to be able to collect via that webinar the questions that are most pressing so that we can tailor our communications. We've also started to talk about whether those webinars can be done in smaller groups, so whether they're held by the principal, which means that the principal's focus on his or her immediate community, which will be a smaller group that allows for communication back and forth like this, or whether that's by complex area, of which we have 15 complex area superintendents. So we are taking the feedback from parents to think about what's that next level of communication design that we need to think about. And we appreciate those suggestions.
For some students have been very engaged with their teachers and they've had the resources to continue their learning. Other students, you have to imagine, really sort of fell off the last 2 months, perhaps through no fault of their own and no fault of their parents. So what is the DOE doing to make sure that students are actually equipped to move on to the next grade level?
So that group of students, we know who they are. We know them by school. They're the ones that we're targeting for the summer learning. They have first priority. We're bringing them in. We're saying you have access to in-person seats. Come check in. When they come to our summer learning program, whether they opt to re-engage via distance learning or in person, we have procured devices to give them, and we're checking in whether they're not being engaged during this time period. Has to do with internet access, with just not having comfort distance learning, whether there are other challenges we can help them with. Again, our telehealth services, which which extends health and mental health and medical health services to our Department of Ed kids. So again, trying to figure out for each child in a very individualized way, what is it that is an impediment right now? And for some of them, it is the difficulty that their parents are in right now. They've lost jobs. They have kupuna who need medical services. They have multiple children who are trying to be on devices. It's just so complex right now for families. And so we're trying to distill it down to how do we simplify it for what that child needs in that home or that group of children that may all be in one home. And so we're doing things like digital learning hubs. So putting Wi-Fi devices on vehicles into communities. So we're rolling that out. We're identifying whether it's libraries or other spaces where kids can come to a centralized location that is not school, but is staffed by a teacher to provide those kind of services. So again, trying to differentiate during a time period that's just very complex for everyone right now.
You know, a month just trying to figure out how you manage all this. Another potential issue could be teacher shortages. I want to bring up another question Alex had about, you know, are teachers retiring early because of distance learning? Maybe some of them not equipped with some or not able to do some of the things that the distance learning requires. And also, is there a shortage of teachers, and what sort of efforts might be making to address a potential teacher shortage because teachers may not want to come back?
So that's probably what keeps all of us up at night. We need the teachers in place, whether it's distance learning or at the school site. And so for teachers who don't have the comfort with technology, some of them may be close to retirement. Some of them just haven't had the breadth of experiences. There's plenty of work for them to do. There's in-person teaching that we need as well. There's co-teaching they can do. There's lots of things they can do and work that they can be engaged in without and have the time to be able to develop those skills. The challenge is that for the last few years, the last 5 years, we've had between 1,100 and 1,300 teacher shortage spaces, right, in terms of classrooms, and it's been quite significant. So we've done extensive reach out to build up that pipeline of teachers, and we're now running into we've built up that pipeline internally in Hawaii and also on the mainland and even abroad. But now travel is grounded, and so teachers on the mainland are saying, I don't know that I'm going to be able to accept that position. And so in the next few weeks, we will have a check-in on what that data looks like in terms of whether that shortage is exacerbated or whether that shortage we are not able to mitigate it a bit with all the work that we've done because of the conditions that we're in or the state that we're in terms of travel.
I know you mentioned at the top that the summer session, for those of people who are joining late, that there will be a modified summer school with, 6 to 8 students in a classroom. How many students do you actually expect to be able to come and learn in person? Do you have a rough estimate in terms of the number of students that will actually be able to access that kind of learning?
I don't have those numbers yet because we're recruiting for teachers right now. So we're hiring them for the summer. Also, we are looking at parent responsiveness or parent response. Are they comfortable sending their child in? They may need the services. They may not have access to technology, which creates another level of design that we need to do to still provide packets of learning over the summer for those parents who are still not comfortable coming to school. On the other hand, we know we have a demand of families who are saying we're ready to send our kids to school, just make sure it's safe, that you have those precautions in place, but we need that support. So we know we will fill seats. How many at this point until we finalize our registration of students who have been invited to come in and be part of those seats? I can come back and certainly keep talking about where we are, but that's data I don't have yet.
Well, you are always welcome because we always get so many questions. Ryan, I know she has to go soon, but there was a registration piece we want to get to.
Well, we wanted, one of the things that I want to kind of lead into was that we know, I think this thing has, this whole effort has, and this whole pandemic has really highlighted some of the things that schools provide that people are not aware of, right? Meals was one of those things that we realized how many students are actually fed through the schools. And the other side of that is just access to healthcare and having a nurse and having somebody that these students could potentially see. And you folks are now starting a way where students can receive health. If you want to maybe talk a little bit more about that opportunity.
So one of the challenges that people may not realize is we have health aides and health rooms in our schools, in each one of our schools. And so when school buildings shut down, that access is cut off. And that's a place to catch students who may have a fever or have a cold, need something addressed. What we've done is transition to telehealth service online. Families can call in. I know the numbers being displayed on the screen. I appreciate that. We invite our Department of Education families to call that line. If your child is sick, you're not sure if you should show up at a hospital, you can talk to a nurse before you make that decision to work through that. Also, we have students who may need some mental health services. They're sad, they're confused, they're missing their friends. If a family calls that line, we'll get them connected to our guidance counselors and our social workers and other staff that we have in the DOE who are all working right now and available to talk to that child and see whether this is longer term health needs or whether this is a just need to understand what's happening around me.
Okay, well, Dr. Christina Kishimoto, thank you so much. Still a lot of questions coming in, so certainly whenever you want to come back, we will have you back because there seems to be a lot of questions. So, but we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sort of address some of these questions, and wish you best of luck. There seems to be a lot of work still ahead for the DOE, but thank you for giving us an update.
We appreciate it, and we encourage everyone to just thank their educators for the tremendous work they're doing.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Ryan, well, she covered a lot of ground. I know some people have joined in late, and so they're asking questions that she covered at the top. But just to recap a few of the headlines there will be some in-person learning happening this summer, but it is going to be quite limited. They're still recruiting teachers who will be willing to actually teach those classes and finding out from parents if they're comfortable sending them. Class sizes around 6 to 8 students, and not quite sure if that's 5 days a week or 3 days a week. It sounds like they are still sort of figuring that out. It's, putting on the shoes while you're running, if you will.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, I mean, she was kind of listing off some of the scenarios, and that's one of the things that struck me. I mean, you look at all these different scenarios that they have to take into consideration. I mean, there's a lot of parents that are also teachers in the Department of Education. So how do you manage being a teacher and teaching your students, but also being responsible for a classroom? So there's so many facets to this dynamics, and then you factor in food and security and safety. There's a lot of things, obviously, that they're still working through, but seems from the last time that we've had that conversation that there is definitely more information that's coming out and opportunities for us to get more information to, of course, the parents out there about what some of the things that they could be looking like. And she said, this mix between in classroom as well as virtual learning is something that is realistically going to happen coming into this next school year. So trying to find that balance between, as an educator, how do you manage that? And as a parent, how you also manage that? Right.
And she did say that they're trying to stand up resources for those teachers so that they can get more training in how to teach online, because I mean, this is a tremendous burden to have the teachers have to make this pivot. And it wasn't like they had a lot of time to prepare. There's one style of learning for the classroom, and certainly teaching in an online scenario, no matter how old the student is going to be very challenging, and it's going to be very different. So she's right. We need to thank our educators. They are under a tremendous amount of stress and doing so much for our community. We did see some positive feedback for some of the teachers online, some of the parents writing in saying that their kids really appreciate that. And we really do appreciate the teachers making that pivot. Also, there's a lot of questions about access. Of course, special education, she talked about that in a little bit and saying that they are trying to work with those classrooms and hopefully getting more of that in person, and also access to digital resources. So those hubs she talked about. So that could literally look like a vehicle driving into a community so that everybody can connect to the Wi-Fi of that vehicle. Or maybe she talked about perhaps libraries. We know that those are closed right now, but those could become learning centers as well. I don't know that they'll be open to the public, but perhaps open to students. So there are just so many variables. And you're right. Kahealani says some teachers are working harder than ever. Certainly so. I would imagine that.
Yeah, I imagine that. And again, we want to encourage some of you who may have come in late to go back and watch this rebroadcast from the beginning, again, it will be posted on the Honolulu Star-Advertiser page, where you can sort of go through this episode as well as any of our past episodes to hear the entire discussion that we had with Superintendent Kishimoto. So again, a great conversation there. Moving on into other news, one of the big headlines coming out again from the island of Kauai, saying that first of all, they are extending that quarantine period for 14-day quarantine period for passengers and travelers coming to the island through June. We know that the state officially goes through the end of this month, but Mayor Kawakami extending that through June with the governor's permission, again, under this new format. But also they will be allowing beaches to reopen beginning tomorrow, part of a 2-week pilot project that will allow people to utilize the beach under certain restrictions, which include, of course, distancing. Everyone at the beach, if you're together with someone, needs to come from the same household. There's going to be certain limitations on time and when you're able to do that. But again, Kauai is sort of trying to test this out to see the beaches, reopening the beaches. We already see people here on Oahu heading to the beaches, I guess, albeit illegally, because you're not allowed to kind of be on the beaches. But Mayor Kawakami is sort of moving into that effort to see if this works for this new 2-week pilot project.
Right. Folks are allowed to swim anywhere, but you're not allowed to, as Mayor Caldwell says, no butts on the beach, right? So you're not supposed to sit down. But Mayor Kawakami is saying that they will allow small groups to congregate, but they don't want any potlucks. They don't want any picnics. They really want you to go there with your household, lay a towel on the sand, go for a swim, maybe hang out a little bit, and then get out of there, leaving room for the next person. And he did say that it's only for 2 weeks, and then they will reevaluate. This is not the green light for this indefinitely, but a lot of people are really anxious to have a little time outside. And it can be hard, especially with little ones, to just go to the beach and swim and then leave. So this gives a little bit more flexibility. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out there. The other big headline is that there was a very interesting survey about the sentiment of how Hawaii is doing from the perspective of citizens. So we encourage you to go there. The paper did a great job of doing a lot of polling and finding out how residents feel about the statewide response. The majority, over 60%, saying that the state's doing a good job and they support the response. And then they got into some more specifics about how many people feel comfortable going to a restaurant, to a hairdresser. As retail starts to open up, will the customer base actually be there? So we encourage you to head to the paper. That is their front page today. And it is a very interesting look at the numbers and how people are feeling as things start to open up.
Yeah, and of course, we just are getting word that the city is going to announce that there will be allowed for public sports for one-on-one activities for public sports. So things like potentially tennis, I believe, or one-on-one basketball, maybe, where there's no contact. We'll wait to get more information, but that's also just coming through right now. So again, every day, and this thing in this living life in COVID, it's like every hour is a day, and every day is a week, and every week is a month. It just things move so quickly. So again, we will try to keep you posted and updated with all these changes that are happening. And again, continue to stay connected to the Honolulu Star-Advertiser, and we'll try our best to also keep you connected as well. One of the things that we always like to do, of course, is highlight a Hawaii hero. And again, we would like to highlight an organization that has really done a lot in our community, even before all of this, and that is Kokua Valley Institution.
Yeah, they have instituted a weekly telehealth and social service check-in that is for the more than 300 kupuna who they serve. These are 30 to 45-minute phone calls to assess health, wellness, any needs so that the seniors can feel cared for. A lot of these folks have been encouraged to stay inside, but that can be very isolating and that can be very just emotionally difficult for them. So we really want to salute them for their efforts. That is a tremendous amount of work to do that kind of outreach. And mahalo to the Hawaii Community Foundation, because this program is made possible with the Hawaii Resilience Fund. So great work from Kokua Valley once again to engage seniors in our community, and a reminder to us all to check in on those who might need help. I'm sure that we can each think of someone that we could call, maybe not for 30 to 45 minutes, but just a quick call to check in and make sure that our kupuna and those in our network are doing well.
Yeah, we want to thank them for being our Hawaii hero. And also, again, we continue to accept letters for our Letters for Kupuna campaign. You can head over to coronavirushawaii.com and you can actually submit a letter that we will deliver to some of these care homes and some of the kupuna. We've already received a great response from the kupuna. They look forward to these letters, so we want to make sure that we continue to get them over to them. So if you want to be involved and help to reach out to kupuna, head over to coronavirushawaii.com, where you can get more information about how you can send your letter in as well. Also happening tomorrow will be yet another food distribution. Again, This one will once again be happening at Aloha Stadium. Cars can begin lining up at 7 a.m., but distribution will begin at 10 a.m. You can head over to hawaiifoodbank.org for more information. We will expect to see these food distributions continue to happen throughout the month on Wednesday and Fridays. And from the responses, we know that people definitely need the support and need food. So we see these long lines every single week. But again, that will be available tomorrow at Aloha Stadium.
Yeah, and those lines really just reflecting the economic hardship. And one of the things that we are going to be talking about tomorrow with some lawmakers is about the enormous budget hole and what lawmakers are doing right now to address that. So we've got two guests tomorrow's program. That'll be very interesting. And Ryan, we're going to be hearing from Representative Yamashita and Senator Keith Agaran.
That's
Gil
right.
Agaran.
Yeah, we're going to be talking to both of them to hear a little bit more about the state's plans and things that are happening with this special session, and how are some of the requirements as with the CARES Act coming in, how that funding is helping to supplement the state budget, but also some of the procedures going forward. The state actually going to have to be borrowing some money in order to complete some of these public works projects. We're going to talk a little bit more about that and some of the things and the logistics behind that, but also how it may impact the state overall budget moving forward. So looking forward to that conversation. And again, next week, another full week with the governor, with Scott Murakami going to be joining us once again, as well as the Lieutenant Governor in weeks to come. So there's a lot of things still planned. Sarah Parker is going to be joining us as well. So we continue to look forward to having this discussion and encourage all of you. If you want to hear specifically from someone, please let us know and we'll try our best to reach out to them as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of those questions. We have invited already, as you heard, the superintendent to come back. So we hopefully will check in with her in the coming weeks again, because we know parents have so many questions and it really is a work in progress. So we appreciate her coming on. We appreciate all of you joining us, and we will see you right back here tomorrow at 10:30.
Aloha. We'll see you then.